It is a period of history which is filled with creativity and with beauty and with learning and with violence, brutality and corruption. It is a period with an intense energy about it, both for good and for bad. It is a story of high politics and corruption in the Catholic Church, sexual and financial corruption. It has nothing to do with contemporary life at all. The heroes of this story are a family called the Borgias, who have been given an astonishingly bad press by history. And my book is not about telling you that they are angels, they are far from angels, but it is telling you that they come from a period which is brutal and corrupt, and partly what they are attempting to do is to create their own power structure and dynasty within that corruption. The paterfamilia, the head of probably one of the most famous families that we will ever see, is a man called Rodrigo Borgia. And at the age of 61, he bribes and politics his way into the greatest job in the politics of the period, which is to be the Holy Roman Father, the Pope. We know a number of things about him when he takes over this post, and probably one of the most shocking is that he has a mistress who is 16 years old. My job as a writer of history and fiction is to bring together the authenticity of the historical detail that I work on, and I do a great deal of research, and then somehow to use that detail to bring to life personalities and moments within history. I know one fact about Giulia Farnese, who is his 16-year-old mistress, which is that she is famous for her extraordinarily beautiful and perfect long golden hair. And the scene I'm about to read, which I warn you now is a sex scene, there are not many sex scenes in the book, but this is a papal sex scene, was partly excited in my imagination by that picture of her hair. The first time Rodrigo Borgia had taken Giulia Farnese to his bed, she had stood nervously in front of him, clothed only in her hair, her breasts and pubic bush peeking out from the sweeping golden curtain. How could a man resist? The Pope's mistress's hair, such a rich topic for gossip. And why not? When holy men lived on top of columns to worship the Lord, the length of their hair was proof of their devotion. For Mary Magdalene, it was both the cloak that covered her shame and the cloth she used to dry the tears in which she washed our Saviour's feet. For Giulia Farnese, though, it has always been the key to glory. At her birth, the midwives had been astonished when, cleaning the blood slime from her head, a set of damp, dark curls had sprung forth. By the age of 1, they had ripened into a yellow harvest, sneaking around her ears. By 3, the locks were on her shoulders, and by 7, halfway down her back. When had they realized it was to be her fortune? Certainly the household was enthralled to its demands early. The washing, the lightening, the oiling, the rinsing, the drying, and the brushing. The endless, endless brushing. While her brothers learned Italian and practiced jousting, she sat immobile, neck muscles braced against the force of the brush, unable to read, unable to sew, unable to do anything but study the weave of the dress in her lap. By the time she started to bleed, this 7th veil, this river in spate, this golden shroud, was down to her knees, and the news of it and her beauty was no longer confined to the house. You are not to be alarmed. That first night it had been brute winter, and he had warmed his hands before, so that as he reached inside her, his touch would not shock. I promise I will do nothing to hurt you. It was not a promise that anyone could make, least of all a man of his power. Still, she had been reassured that he had said it. There were many who would not have bothered. Later, he had arranged her locks across the pillow and over the bed, like a giant sunburst pulsing out from her head. and later still, he had coaxed her into riding on top of him and letting it fall and sweep over his chest and face. In all of this, he was a courteous and fulsome lover, delighting so much in his own delight that it had been impossible to be frightened of him. Yet she had been afraid. Not just of her own power, because by now she had some understanding of that, but because this silky wonder that she carried with her would stay perfect only when left alone. Once the sweat and suck of skins took over, it began to snag and tangle. Then there were moments when he would roll over onto it and her head would be caught by his weight. Of course, she did not cry out, for it was her and she was it, and together they were his mermaid and his Venus and his very own Mary. After the first 5 or 6 encounters, the daytime house rang out with the sound of her yelps. By now, the matting and tangling had set fast, and however gently the house slave pulled at it, however wide-toothed the comb used, Julia could not stop herself from crying, so that after a while neither she nor they were sure if it was her hair or her life she was weeping over, for so much had changed in so short a time. In the end, she had had to tell him. He had been surprisingly understanding. Her desire to please was touching, and truth be told, he too had been finding it somewhat tiresome negotiating this third lover in the bed. Together, they agreed to its imprisonment, and from then on, when they made love, it was held inside a heavy rope plait, which in its way did as good a job, for when she stood naked, it hung down over her buttocks into the crack between her legs. Now, as he entered her, he scooped it up and looped it once, then twice around her neck, as if it was a heavy gold necklace, or a noose. And she, because she was a fast learner, threw back her head and groaned, as if he was indeed strangling her, and the experience was as exciting as it was fearful.